and we are back with Chancellor Castro for part 2.
Hi, Elisabeth. And we are honored to continue hosting Chancellor Castro again in this Wisdom Studio episode, this time on authentic leadership in a pandemic. Chancellor Castro, you have been honored by your fellow internationally recognized scholars as well as individual communities as someone who demonstrates the basic qualities of an authentic leader. And we want to hear about your personal journey as an authentic leader, because we know that authentic leadership has a lot to do with people's life story. So looking back in your PhD years at Stanford, you worked with Professor Jim March, one of the most prominent scholars in organizations research, whom I also had the pleasure to meet with when I was doing my doctorate at University of British Columbia, right before joining Sacramento State. Fabulous personality. Yeah. And also you did your dissertation on university presidents and the role of optimism. And that was the topic that we ended our previous episode with in higher education leadership. And this is how many years ago? And where you are at right now, and look at the consistency. So how did these early experiences influence your journey? Did you already imagine something in the future and took steps from there? And how did all that experience influence you as the university president and also being a chancellor now to an institution that is responsible for the higher education of 1 in every 20 Americans holding a college degree?
Thank you. Well, I'll have to shorten my story for this purpose. I'm the grandson of immigrants from Mexico and the son of a single mother. And I mention that, I start with that because it was my grandparents and my mother who really were the anchors for me and for my life. And they didn't go to college, but they could have if they had had the opportunity. So they wanted me to have that opportunity. And I would start with my grandmother, who gave me tremendous discipline. She taught me discipline. She would say, you can be in the front yard, but you can't go over there and you can't go over there. And she didn't even have to be out to watch me. She just knew I would follow her rules. And my grandfather taught me about patience and listening and compassion. I used to spend a lot of time with him, and I'd watch him interact with everybody, and I never saw him lose his temper one time in his 90 years of life. And then my mother was ahead of her time. She was very progressive and very open to ideas and people. And as a kid, I learned so much about different people from different backgrounds. And so those are my anchors. And I would say that I discovered in high school that I wanted to serve others. And then in college, as I mentioned in other podcasts, that I decided that higher education transformed my own life, and I wanted to try to pass that gift on to others. So that really is what drove me to study public policy and leadership. And I was so very blessed to cross paths with Jim March. He changed my whole thinking about leadership. And if I could describe it in one way, because we were asked to do this together before he passed away at a Stanford ceremony, I described what I learned from him, and it almost paralleled the way he described working with me. But to boil it down, Quixote's "Yo sé quién soy," I know who I am. And that really is at the heart for me of leadership and serving others. And I wouldn't be here without Jim March, I can tell you that.
I recently came across his documentary on Don Quixote. So he went to Spain and produced a documentary in the places where Cervantes wrote the Don Quixote story. And your motto is bold. So I see some parallels there also. So is there any relationship? And if that is the case, what are your windmills?
Well, bold really came to me as I was becoming president at Fresno State. And it was in part because I could see in this incredible campus so much potential. And it had just come out of the Great Recession, and people seemed to be tired, not thinking in big ways, constrained by resource conversations. And I arrived so excited, full of energy, and I saw that and I said, I think that the talent is here, The ideas are here. I would like you to be bold in sharing those ideas with me. And boy, it was like taking the lid off of a can. I mean, the ideas started coming. And I think that is one reason why we accomplished so much together when I was there, and they continue to rise. And so the Be Bold came from that. And even yesterday when we were interviewing candidates for the presidency, that kept coming up with the committee members. So it's sticking, which is great.
I love it.
I kind of wanted to jump to this current generation.
Sure.
We are today with Gen Z, or Zoomers as they're called. And I'm just wondering, we hear a lot about them being very distinct from their predecessors in relation to technology. They're supposedly more anxious, fearful, and yet feel more entitled. I can never really make the two make sense for me. So what I'm wondering is this even the case that we are that generationally different from one another as we go along? And if so, does that increase the complexity of the university providing them support? So Chancellor Castro, can you help me make sense of those?
Well, thank you. I think where I would start is that I'm incredibly optimistic about the future when I meet our students. They are, in my opinion, in general, the ones that I work with are far ahead in terms of their foresight than I was at that age. And they're more adept at the use of technology, of course, than I was at their age. I'm blessed to have both, with my wife, we have two older adult children, 32 and 28. And then we have this bonus guy who's 10. So I'm getting to kind of see a different generation through his eyes. And he is so accustomed to technology, and he learns differently, he acts differently. And I love the way I love it. So from my perspective, we as universities, we need to understand where our students are coming from of all ages, and to adapt our practices, and have been listening and learning from them. And again, I'm excited about where we're heading with them as the next generation of leaders.
But when it comes to our core values and our basic desires and capabilities, can we not share the same space intergenerationally? And is the
Yes.
future of the university system is also a more generationally diverse population, is it not?
Generational melting pot almost, right? So we bring generations, because
Yes.
professors come from the old generation. You got the new generation, we interact and we create the next culture, I guess, next wave of culture.
I agree. I mean, we're such a unique institution in society. I had a chance to study with John Gardner as well at Stanford. And one of the things that he really kind of drove home to me is just the vitally important role that our universities play, and how they change. Because as you said, Professor, we get a new group of students every single year, and then new faculty and staff. And there's a way in which universities not only reflect the changes of the society that we serve, but through the creation of new knowledge, we actually influence society in tremendous ways.
I never feel getting old. I am getting old now, but I feel like I'm still like a university student simply because of that dynamic synergy. So,
Yeah.
Chancellor Castro, during the pandemic, our society has been facing some drastic social challenges, including social inequality, racial injustice, and many adverse outcomes related to social isolation. And as an organizational scholar, I also see that derivatives of these social challenges seems to become increasingly common in organizations in different forms, such as discrimination, workplace bullying, ostracism, and so forth. So, and you are again sitting at the top of an organization where there are literally hundreds of thousands of people that you are responsible for. And I'm gonna now approach from out of my curiosity, because I'm really curious that like how you manage, because being an authentic leader requires to really sticking to your values, but at the same time you have to put out fires probably on a daily basis in a pandemic. So sometimes you have to make some decisions that are practical, but then you might need to come back and reflect. And quite a few leaders probably take the easy route and become a transactional leader and act on their formal power, or get more pragmatic and move on. But being an authentic leader almost creates these two, tensions in one body, and you are a human being with 24 hours a day, like emotional and psychological. What personal strategies do you use, and can leaders use to keep that tension between keeping the big picture there and the values and the mission, and also at the same time being practical and managing the day-to-day challenges of the organization?
Great questions. Boy, we could spend hours talking about this. I think it starts for me with listening and learning from those that I work with and that I serve. And that's the basis for everything for me. It starts with that. And I'm still reflecting on the pretty profound change in job between president and chancellor. And I loved being president. It was just the most incredible, exhilarating experience. It was like a bull ride every single day. And in bull riding, you don't know what bull you're going to get until you get ready to get on the bull. And that's how it feels, in my opinion, leading an organization. And the chancellor role is very different, and the listening and learning is even, in my opinion, more important, because I'm spending a lot of time listening and learning from legislators who help to fund us, and I'm trying to inspire them. I'm constantly in touch with the president, so usually they'll call me if there's some particular problem or challenge. So I need to be ready to listen, learn, and try to help them, guide them through that particular challenge or emergency. I work for a board of trustees, which has been incredible. They understand their broad oversight role, but they don't get involved in the day-to-day details. Those are some of the ways in which I work now, and that's so different than when I was president, working with students and faculty and staff. I still do that, but it's really in these system conversations.
This is a question that my co-author Sigal Barsait from the Wharton School and I have been debating for a decade, more than a decade now, because we are doing research on loneliness. So in the midst of all this, Chancellor Castro, is it lonely at the top?
I think it's very important for leaders to not lose their connections to their family and friends. And I have very strong connections to my core family, which is my youngest son and my wife. They're my core, and then my two older kids. But then my mother, I talk to her frequently, and my sister. And so in my opinion, that's so important. And then to have friends who are your friends before you were president or before you were chancellor. I have friends that I've known since I was 5 years old, and they're my closest friends. And then for me, it's also been important to stay in close touch with my mentors. And I call them from time to time to describe a challenge, and they help me think it through. And, whether it's Mark Udoff or David Gardner, who was my first president when I began my professional career, he's in his 90s in Utah, and I'll call him occasionally. Jim, I used to call, but he's passed away, God bless his soul. And Don Kennedy and Carol Tomlinson-Kesey. I have a lot of mentors that I call, and Carol passed away, but the ones that are alive, I get to still connect with. And for me, that's so important.
I'd like to thank you, Chancellor. You're so gracious in acknowledging the influence of others in your life and career. And it sounds like we could not be more fortunate than to have a leader such as yourself. Thank you.
I feel like I'm in safe hands.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been an honor to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Chancellor Castro. It's our pleasure to host you, and we wish you all the best and look forward to hosting you again.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to it.